Patrice, I assume you'll need to take a roll call of who's here.
Yes, sir, I will. I'm going to start the roll call with the Finance Committee. Finance Chairman Chris Parker.
Present.
Commissioner Tom Griffin.
Present.
Commissioner Hugh Jernigan.
Present.
Commissioner Alan Younger. No, won't be here. Commissioner Harold Day. Commissioner Yvonne Hines. Commissioner Wesley Curtis.
Present.
Commissioner Dwayne Long.
Present.
Chairman of the Commission, Randall Tuttle.
Present.
And Commissioner Charles Wilson.
Present.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Patrice. And thank everyone for carving out some time this Tuesday afternoon for the
Who's the vice chair?
So I think he froze. I was hoping it wasn't my computer, but
Yeah, I was hoping it wasn't mine either.
okay. Give it just a few minutes to see if he comes back.
He's right. Tom, you're right. Who's the vice chair? There you go.
There he is.
It's you, Wes.
Okay, I guess somebody didn't want me to continue, but anyway, I've gotten back in. Thanks for that, technical issues. But I will now turn things over to Courtney before I get dropped again.
Okay, thanks. Good afternoon, Chairman Parker, Finance Committee members of the Utility Commission. Today we're going to kick off our FY22 water and sewer cost of service study. The intent of the study is to ensure that the rates that we charge, we are charging appropriately, or the rates that we charge appropriately reflect the cost of providing water and sewer service to our customers, while also taking into account the goals and objectives of the Utility Commission. So today we have Elaine Vassis, Will Kerr, and Ford Mariotti. I'm sure I probably did not pronounce that right, but they're with Reftelis. And so they're going to walk us through an overview of the schedule, the process, and the goals of the study. And we'll also ask for some feedback from the Commission on your priorities for setting future water and sewer rates. And the last study we did was in 2018, I believe it was, so it's been about 4 years by the time we finish it in FY22. So we try to do this every 4 years just so to make sure that we are staying on top of our rate setting process and make sure that our goals are in line with the Utility Commission's objectives. So with that, I will turn it over to Elaine. And just, Elaine, let me know if you're ready for me to share my screen or if you need to say a few words first.
Courtney, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, perfect, because I've actually called in.
Okay, yes.
Great. That's the first thing I wanted to check. So I'm ready for you to share the screen, and I think you're going to kind of control and flip through. Is that correct? Okay, so can you all still hear me?
We can.
Okay, great, perfect. Well, thank you all. Thanks for having us today. We're excited to be in front of you again and have this opportunity to do this study. As Courtney said, what you've asked us to do is a cost of service study. And so today what we want to do is give you a very brief overview of the cost of service process. We then want to talk a little bit about the past study, the objectives and the results. We then want to talk again briefly on the existing rate structure and some of the data that we're going to use to inform the process. And most importantly, at the end of this, what we're going to do is we're going to get your feedback. That's what's most important today. So that's what's going to be our focus at the very end. And then we also want to make sure we answer any of your questions. So that's the one thing that's a little hard when we're on Zoom. certainly stop me as we go through the presentation. It's going to be me and Will today doing the presentation, but if not, we will have time at the end to make sure we answer any questions. You'll go to the next one. So to give you the study overview, what you've asked us to do is a cost of service study. And as Courtney said, it's really looking at your current revenue recovery compared to the cost recovery. And in a minute, we're going to look at a slide that kind of talks about the cost of service process and what that really means. But ultimately, we're comparing your current revenue recovery to the cost recovery. We're also going to be developing rates as part of the cost of service process. It's the perfect time to kind of reevaluate and refine the rate structure if necessary. That basically does the following. We want to make sure that we're achieving your pricing objectives, and that's what we're going to get from you today. We certainly want to make sure we're reflecting industry standards, and we also want to make sure that we're reasonably distributing costs to your users so that we're collecting that representative kind of cost causation to customer categories. And the last thing that you've asked us to do is also evaluate other fees and charges. Separate from your monthly water and sewer fees, you have other fees, and we're going to review those and make sure that those are appropriately recovering their costs such that, again, the monthly rates are recovering their portion of the cost that they should be. So that's kind of the comprehensive cost of service study that we'll be undertaking over the next couple of months. So go ahead to the next one. So the rate setting process is really a 5-step process. It starts with the identification of the pricing objectives, and that is ultimately what we're going to get from you today. As you'll notice, that is the foundation, that's the building block of what we're doing, and it guides the entire study and why it's really important. Once we have those from you, what we'll then do is we take the next couple of months and we identify the revenue requirements, which basically means we're looking at the utilities cost, the operating cost, the capital cost, and we're projecting those over time. We're also looking at the demand or the customer characteristics, customer categories, and lots of customer data that we'll want to analyze. Once we do that, we then start really kind of the crux of the cost allocation, which is to allocate costs. And here what we're doing is we're, in a sense, taking those costs and we're putting them into kind of buckets. Those buckets can be between water and sewer. They are between the fixed component and the volumetric component. And they're also among customer categories. And we go through a pretty detailed process using industry standards to come up with those cost allocations. And once we have those cost allocations, it then lets us kind of revisit or refine the rate structure. And that's what we do in step 4. And then in step 5, we really assess the effectiveness of any refinement to the rate structure. We want to compare that to the pricing objectives. Is it meeting those pricing objectives? And as you'll notice when we really get into the pricing objectives discussion, we'll have to balance out some of those pricing objectives as well, because they will compete against each other. And as we said, at the very end of this, we're gonna talk about the pricing objectives. What I'm gonna do now is have Will kind of walk you through the objectives from the last goal, from the last study, and then what we were able to achieve.
Thanks, Elaine. Can you all hear me okay? See a thumbs up. Great. Yeah, so like Elaine mentioned, I'm going to step through a handful of slides here. First, wanted to revisit some of the rate setting goals that we've established in prior cost of service studies. Like Courtney mentioned, we've done these studies in 2014 and 2018. And as a part of those studies, we've identified a handful of goals that we've been, slowly and steadily making progress towards over the last couple of years. So the first one is water and sewer inequity. And what we identified is that water was potentially over-recovering revenue and sewer was potentially under-recovering revenue. So we've been working towards a goal to make sure that water pays for water and sewer pays for sewer. And I'll show you a chart on that progress in just a second. The next goal was fixed charge insufficiency, a priority of ours in the last cost of service last couple of cost of service studies was increasing our fixed charge revenue recovery. So our goal was 25% fixed recovery, and we've made good progress to that. We're at around 20% now. So we've made good progress on that goal as well. And then the third goal we identified was simplifying our rates, and we've been able to reduce the number of service area differentials or multipliers, which is a good thing. Those are maintained under separate agreements by contracts with various jurisdictions. So there are some constraints there in how far we can go on that, but I've got a little blurb on the next slide to help illustrate. So I think we showed these charts to you all during the affordability presentation, but just wanted to re-review some of this information. The chart over here on the left is the revenues collected from water and sewer rates. And so this was goal 1. And we had identified that we wanted to recover around 47% of our revenues from water and 53% from sewer. And as you can see, we made pretty good progress on that goal. We were at 55% water revenue recovery in 2014. Last fiscal year 21, which just ended a couple of months ago, we were around 52% revenue recovery from water. This one will be an interesting goal to revisit during this study, because I know we've got some big costs and projects on the water side, like the Nielsen water plant. So it'll be interesting to see if this 47-53 split, still holds. So that'll be something we will, revisit as part of this study. In terms of fixed revenue recovery, we made some good progress there as well. You can see our 25% target over there on the right. On a combined basis in 2014, we were only recovering about 12% of our revenues on a fixed charge basis. So we've made pretty good progress on that goal, getting up to around 20% this most recent fiscal year. And again, demonstrated good progress there. We also reduced the number of rate differentials by roughly half. So again, that's helped remove some of the moving pieces and complexities from our rate structure. A quick refresher for everyone on the existing rates. We've got, for both water and sewer, we've got a base charge or a readiness to serve charge. And we've got separate charges for each of these services. And within the services, there are separate charges for our bi-monthly and our monthly customers. These charges escalate by meter size. So if you have a larger meter, you've got a larger base charge, and that's a pretty common practice across the water and sewer industry. On the water side, we've got a consumption charge, which is assessed per cubic foot. For domestic water, it's a 4-tier structure, and the first 3 blocks are inclining blocks. So essentially the unit cost increases as you use more water. But once you get into the 4th block, that block declines, and it's closer, basically returns almost to that tier 1 rate. So there's a couple of good things that structure does. It promotes conservation with the first 3, inclining blocks, but then it recognizes that we've got some larger customers out there with high demands. So we've got that 4th block, which helps recognize that the cost to serve those customers is maybe lower than, the residential side of things. We've also got a separate rate for our irrigation customers. All of that usage is billed at the tier 3 rate, which is our highest rate. And that's all, typically irrigation is all elective consumption. So that's a fairly common practice across the industry to price irrigation usage, higher than baseline, essential non-elected type usage. On the sewer side, we've also got a consumption charge, which is assessed per cubic foot. That's just a uniform volume charge for all customers. So all customers are paying the same cost per cubic foot. for each, for their sewer volumes. You can go to the next one, Courtney. So we've got 2 slides here. Just wanted to revisit some high level information about your customers and the way that they put different demands on our water and sewer systems. So what we've got here is a breakdown of customers and usage for fiscal year 2021. On the customers side of things, so our customer count, that table over there on the left, you can see the vast majority of our customer accounts, our connections, are residential customers. So about 93% of all of our customers are residential accounts. And then the balance comes from our commercial, our non-residential type customers. However, usage is a little bit of a different story. Our residential customers only account for about half of the volumes of water that we sell. So just an important reminder that our customer classes and our customers demand the system differently, and we'll want to be sensitive to the types of demands that each of those types of customers put on our water and sewer systems. So let me walk you quickly through this chart. This is just some more billing information, and I'm not sure, you may have seen these in previous cost of service studies, but what this is a bill frequency for our residential bi-monthly customers during fiscal year 2021. And what this shows is a tabulation of bills at each level of consumption for bills issued during fiscal year 2021. So the way that I read this chart is I look, at example, or for an example here at 600 cubic feet, we issued about 47,000 bills during fiscal year 2021 for our bi-monthly residential customers. So this helps us understand how our residential customers are using the system. So what we can take from this is we can see that our median customer is there at 9 CCF or 900 cubic feet per bi-monthly billing period, while our average, which is maybe skewed up a little bit by some high users, as well as maybe some multifamily users that are in this class, is there at 10. And then right before this meeting, I actually pulled a couple of other statistics. Another interesting data point is our low 25% quartile is at 500 cubic feet. So 25% of our customers are using 5 CCF or less. And then the upper 75% is at 1,400 cubic feet. So the interpretation there is 75% of our residential customers are using 1,400 cubic feet or less on a bi-monthly basis. So just some interesting statistics that we'll use as we're thinking about modifications to the rate structure. And this type of analysis is really important for rate design, especially if we adjust tiers, then we know how much usage is falling under what tiers and what, the number of customers that we're capturing within each. Okay, so shifting away a little bit from the billing information and more revisiting our affordability analysis. One thing we identified in our affordability analysis is that our water and sewer is provided at a pretty affordable rate, especially when you compare it to our peers and the North Carolina median. And, I'm sure you all know this and have seen different variations of this chart before, but as you can see, our position here among our peers is pretty good up here at the top. We're one of the lowest, costs in terms of water and sewer service to our customers. So as we're conducting this study, this is definitely something we want to keep in mind. During the affordability analysis, we looked at cost of living as well as demographics for Winston-Salem, and we looked at kind of the other piece that we'll talk about in just a second was looking at things more on a census tract or household income level. But from the top level, we wanted to make sure that we remained competitive with our tiers and remained, at a similar position in this chart. So that's something we'll want to do as we're conducting our studies. We'll want to make sure that any changes we're implementing, that we don't move ourselves too far out of our position among our peers here. So within that affordability study, we looked at things on a census tract and extrapolated that to a household level income analysis. Well, we use census data to basically assign income information among our customers to basically take a guess at income information for them. But what we found in that is we identified some customers and some census tracts where there might be high densities of at-risk customers. And we'll want to make sure, we drew this sort of threshold here around 7% and said, you know what, we need to keep an eye on these census tracts and the bills for these folks that are at or above 7%. As we conduct this study, we'll want to make sure that we're not pushing more folks in this kind of household burden indicator category up above that 7% threshold that we established. So the big takeaway, here from these slides is we're going to make sure as we're conducting the cost of service study that we're considering the analysis that we ran for affordability, and that we're not, making things worse with rate design modifications. And that's maybe not.
It's Chris Parker. Do we have delinquency rates for those areas?
So we ran that as part of the study, and I think that would have been early 2021, with maybe still some lingering impacts from COVID. We have not updated that with the latest and greatest information, but we certainly can, if you think that would be valuable.
Well, I think it would be interesting to see if there is a correlation between delinquency and the areas you're saying are estimated to be at risk. Because the delinquency would be because obviously they're delinquent.
Right. Yeah, and it would indicate, the other tools that we could kind of help those folks out with if they're already delinquent, maybe a payment plan or something like that could help them get back square. And when we ran that analysis, it was definitely, there were some similarities between the high delinquent census tracts as well as what we kind of identified as at risk in our analysis. But I do think an update would be a good idea given how things have changed since COVID.
Chris, it's Tom. Question, Will, along that same line. The issues that we had in the last 18 months with the delinquency, is that going to skew some of these numbers in terms of people making a decision, well, they're not going to cut me off, I'm just not going to pay, and they started using more water and doing things differently because of the whole dynamic that was going on with the COVID issues? I guess I'm just asking, do you think maybe the data is a little bit skewed because of that and not really reflective of exactly what's going on in those census tracts?
Yeah, it's hard to know. There probably is. I think, nationwide, we did see a little bit of that when turnoffs were suspended for folks, delinquencies started increasing. And, turnoffs, though somewhat of a could be seen by some folks as harsh, are a very effective kind of manner to encourage and incentivize collection. So it's definitely something to consider. And Elaine, I don't know if you've got other thoughts on that,
Yeah, the other thing that I would add, Will, is when we perform the cost of service study, one of the things that we do is we pick a test year. And so what that means is we pick a test year for our cost that we're gonna focus on. And then we also, as part of that, kind of have a test year for the customer information. So what we certainly want to do is we want to, when you're doing cost of service, you don't, to your point, you don't want to pick something that's a little more of an anomaly. You want to look and see, you know, how will this play out over time? Because the changes, if we refine, you know, the rate structure or make any changes, you're gonna have that in place for several years out. You're not gonna want to obviously modify the rate structure every other year. So what we do have, when we did the affordability analysis, I think we have historical information and current information. So we will want to see what are some of those patterns, but also how have they evolved over time from a usage perspective. The cost of service is really going to focus more on the cost and then the usage characteristics. From a delinquency perspective, it really doesn't factor in. In other words, we look at the costs that need to be recovered, and then we look at the customers that are there and the usage that's there to recover those. We don't want to necessarily build in there's X% that may not pay, or there's X% that are on payment plans. We want to look at it more from that cost and customer usage characteristics that we think will happen over time, especially as we, you know, continue to focus on payment plans, connecting folks with options that are out there to pay some of these bills that may be outstanding. Hope that helps.
And I'll just add to this, Elaine, I think that was good. We can definitely, I can send back out the presentation, the affordability presentation to the commission, just as a reminder, where they did show those delinquent accounts, and we can certainly update that information to see where we're at now. So we can do that also.
Great. Thanks, Courtney. So in terms of our existing structure, and I'm going to sort of wrap things up here before I kick it back over to Elaine to talk about pricing objectives. You know, just wanted to talk quickly about, you know, the strengths and challenges of our existing structure. You know, the strengths are, we've got our 3-tier inclining block structure. So that's going to incentivize efficient water use, especially among our residential customers. But then we've got that 4th tier, which is a declining block, and recognizes that there's typically a lower cost to serve those larger customers who have a more steady state and stable demand pattern. So those are certainly two good things about our current structure. We've got good balance between revenue stability and conservation. You know, we've got pretty good revenue stability there at 20%, and we're not relying too heavily on a really aggressive tiered pricing structure. So, you know, definitely kind of all of these things tying well and working well among each other. And then it's, you know, it's fairly simple to understand. We don't have separate rates by class. You know, we do have monthly and bi-monthly, but folks are running through the same rates and similar structures. So, you know, in general, there's not a whole lot of moving pieces. You know, and the one major challenge, maybe not major, but the one challenge that we've identified is really, you know, the trade-off between revenue stability and affordability. And if those are two of our top, you know, pricing objectives, because I know we've talked a lot about affordability over the last year, 2 years, and then revenue stability was an older main goal of ours. Those two pricing objectives are going to conflict with each other because the mechanism for revenue stability is higher fixed charges. And as you increase fixed charges, you give folks, especially residential customers, less control over their bill as the fixed component makes up a larger proportion. So that'll just be something we'll have to think through, and definitely interested to get y'all's opinions and insight in terms of pricing objectives. And then a component of that will be reevaluating our tier structure. Do those thresholds still meet our goals? So that's what we'll use, that bill frequency analysis for. Are we capturing the right number and volumes in our tiers? Do these help us meet the goals that we've identified?
Hey, Will, this is Randall Tuttle on the tension between revenue stability and affordability. Please remind us. I don't think we can legally or by statute set up special classes of bill pay. Is that correct?
That's right. And Elaine, feel free to chime in, but I think that within North Carolina, those types of if you're providing direct assistance to folks through bill discounts, I think it's got to come from the general fund. Within the enterprise fund, I don't think that we can, price servicely different for, a certain type of customer. It is common to have a residential and a non-residential rate broken out separately, because you run this cost of service and you can basically demonstrate that it's, you've got different costs of basically that there's different costs of providing service to different types of customers. But I think within those classes is where you run into issues with what you bring up.
Yeah, and the flexibility we do have is what Will alluded to at the very end, which is looking at the thresholds and the rates at those thresholds. That's where, as long as, so for example, through the cost of service study, you could look at establishing that first tier. You could do two different things with it. Either the rate could be lower, but that applies to everybody, so everybody gets the benefit of that first rate, of that lower rate. Now, of course, if you lower something, it's got to come from something else, but still kind of recognizing that as long as everybody gets that first tier, which they will, it's uniformly applied. Or the other thing you can look at, or in combination, is you could potentially allow more use within that first tier to provide it at that low, in other words, allow more usage of that at that lowest rate. And again, you have to see how, any change you make is going to impact another, type of customer. And so those are the things that we want to look at.
Well, it's Tom Griffin. The fixed charge is the 31%. Was that recently calculated?
It was. We had a 31% of basically a 10 CCF bi-monthly bill. That fixed water sewer base charge component made up, if you just took a single bill for a residential customer at 10 CCF, it was 31%.
Okay, and I would assume at 500, it would be a whole lot bigger percentage, I would assume.
That's correct, yep.
Okay.
Okay, if there are no other questions at this point, what we'll do is we're going to go over the pricing objectives. I think you all may have been sent this, but we're going to walk through each one. And then after we walk through each of the pricing objectives, what we're going to do is we're actually going to pull up a poll and have you all choose your top three. But before we do that, we obviously want to make sure that everybody has a good understanding of what each objective means, so that you can then choose them. And this, before we get to that, this slide just really kind of represents exactly what Will was speaking to earlier, which is some of these pricing objectives will compete, and it'll be up to us to help balance those, or at least help you understand, if we're focusing on one more than the other, what those trade-offs are, and what those impacts are to customers and to which customers. That's part of this process, and that's what we'll do to kind of make sure that we balance those as best we can. And just because we're going to ask you to choose your top 3 doesn't mean that we're ignoring the rest of them. We will consider all of them. But when we ask you to choose your top 3, that just helps us understand, what's most important to you, but doesn't mean that we're going to ignore everything else that we know we need to consider as well. Just going on to the next slide, I think it'll show us all of the pricing objectives, and this is what we're going to have you choose your top 3. The first that we have listed is affordability, and as we've talked a lot about, with affordability, what you're really saying is, if this is an important pricing objective, you're in a sense saying that the rate structure should be designed such that essential use, and again, the key word is essential, is available to residential customers at an affordable price. That's what we're talking about there. And as we mentioned previously, in North Carolina, there's certain constraints that we're working with, but through the rate structure design and the cost of service process, what we plan to do, if that's important to you, is to look to see where we can potentially look to the fixed versus the volumetric and looking at those tiers. So that's affordability. The second pricing objective is conservation, which is, if conservation is important, what you're saying is the rate structure should incentivize water conservation. It should reward those customers that are using water efficiently, either through changing out appliances or just with their behavior. That's the second one. The third is rate stability and minimization of customer impacts. And what this one is speaking to is you want the rate structure to be developed to reduce dramatic increases over time and among the customer categories. And you want to promote that rate stability for basically like smaller programmatic increases when possible. So here you're trying to make sure that there's not what we call huge rate spikes or significant impacts to different customer categories. And the fourth one is revenue stability. And here is what we've talked a lot today with this is the fixed component. So if revenue stability is important to you, you want the rate structure to provide steady and predictable revenues, which is through that fixed monthly component. Then the fifth one is you want it to be simple to understand and implement. That means you want the rate structure to be easy for customers to understand, and it should be implemented without significant costs to the utility. As you can imagine, you can come up with extremely complex rate structures, but you also have to have a billing system that can accommodate that. So then the sixth one is equity among customer categories. If this is important, you're saying that the rate structure should have each category of customer pay their fair share of cost of service. And it kind of gets back to the discussion that Will was having, different categories of customers place different demands on the water or sewer system. And then the final one is economic development. And here you're saying that the rate structure should promote economic development. And really what we're saying here is you want to be sensitive to any impact on the non-residential customers. That's what kind of economic development means is, you want to make sure that if there is a large industry or just the non-residential sector, you want to be sensitive to that class and making sure that you're promoting economic development. So I'm going to stop there for a minute and make sure that we don't have, or if we do have questions, we can answer them so that everybody's kind of clear on what these mean before we ask you to choose your top three. I don't know if anybody can see if there's any questions or hands raised or perplexed looks.
Hey, this is Dwayne Long. I got a question to Chris Parker or to Courtney. Those of us that are not members of the Finance Committee, are we to vote on these as well?
Yes, we'd like for every commission member to vote on these.
Well, question about that, Courtney. Do we have a quorum of the full board?
So, this, and I guess we can discuss it. So this is, I guess, basically a work session where there's nothing to formally approve. Okay. So we thought that the more, the more information, the more people that take the poll, the more information we would have.
Okay. Okay.
If there are no other questions, we'll see if we're going to keep our fingers crossed. I think Patrice is going to help us pull up the poll.
Before we start, I know we lost Randall for a minute, so I just want to make sure he didn't have any questions about what we're doing here before we start.
Sorry, I just thought it's amazing what you do when you run upstairs and unplug the router and plug it back in. So it's much healthier now. If you wouldn't mind, I'm sorry, just 10 seconds. What are we doing? I just got here.
Yeah, so Elaine, why don't you go ahead and tell them?
Yeah, sure, no problem. So you see, we have 7 pricing objectives in front of you, and what we're going to have you do in a minute is we're going to have you choose your top 3 pricing objectives. So in a minute, what you're going to see a poll pop up, and it should have all 7 of these listed. It's not going to have the description, but it's going to have the ones that on the left-hand side, and we're going to ask you to choose your 3. And would you like me to go over them really quickly?
No. I remember this.
Okay.
That was helpful. Yeah, we're gonna pick our top 3. Got it.
Yep, that's exactly right. Your top 3. I will say this: the poll does not limit you to 3, but we want you to only choose your 3. So when it's pulled up, just make sure you've only clicked on 3 before you hit submit. I'm going to see here if it's going to allow. And Courtney, I don't know if you're driving it or.
I think Patrice is. Patrice, are you ready?
Okay.
I am ready.
Okay.
You want me to launch it now?
I think we're ready.
Yes.
Okay.
Do we need some music?
Gail. So I have launched it.
And
Okay.
so I guess it pops up for everyone, but only the Utility Commission members will vote on it or do the poll.
And Courtney, it is anonymous. It is anonymous also.
Yeah.
So.
Anonymous, and just make sure you choose 3 before you hit the submit button.
There is no submit.
I think it's automatically calculating it.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, there's a submit.
There is a
There was
yeah.
I've got
and Tom, to your point, we've got 6 of the 9 current commissioners are here, along with Randall.
Yeah. Well, I have selected my 3, and all I've got is close at the top. I do not have a submit that I can find.
It may be, Mr. Griffin, it may be at the bottom of your screen. It may be hidden at the bottom of your screen. You may need to move that little box up a little bit, the white box up.
Thanks, Michael. So we're not going to argue amongst ourselves.
We're going to let you argue after we see the results. Or discuss after we see the
There you go.
You were able to submit it, Mr. Griffin?
I sent it.
Yep. So it looks like we have 6 out of 6 that have completed it, the poll. So I'm gonna go ahead and end it now. Mike, is there anything else you want me to do with it?
Well, before you end it, I guess we've captured. Can everybody see that on my screen?
Wait a minute. You said 6 out of 6. Is Randall not voting?
I voted.
Because we've got 7 here: Randall, Charles, Dwayne, Wesley, Hugh, Tom, and myself.
It says 6 out of 6, 100% answered.
So we got 7.
And the question might be which one of us didn't get one. If only 6 went out.
There you go. That's the question.
So, Mr. Curtis,
Yep.
Mr. Walker, Mr. Tuttle, Mr. Griffin, Mr. Jernigan, is he there?
Oh, he
left.
He did say that he was going to have to step away, so I bet he was going to be
And
in
Mr.
and out
Wilson.
instead.
Yes, he said he would be in and out.
Yeah.
So that's the 6.
Yep. That's what happened.
I'm in and out all the time.
So, Elaine, are we all right with me ending the poll now? Or you want to share your screen, Courtney?
Well, I'm wondering if you guys can see the poll.
No, we can just see the descriptions.
Okay. Sorry. So it's showing up on my screen, but maybe because I'm a co-host. Yeah, I guess you can end it.
Yeah, I don't think that it'll show up on their screens.
Okay.
But I have captured it, and I'm sure that it should be recorded. Okay.
Okay.
So what's number 1 with our group?
The number 1 that I captured was affordability.
Mm-hmm.
And number 2 is rate stability, minimization of customer impacts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And go ahead. What's number 3?
Number 3 is revenue stability.
Boy, all of you other commissioners are really smart.
Okay. Elaine, okay to end the poll now so you can continue?
Yes, that's fine to end the poll. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. And I can share the results now.
Yeah.
Can you all see them?
Mm-hmm.
You can see
Okay.
affordability, rate stability, and revenue stability.
Yep.
Yeah. So as we talked about earlier, we'll be balancing the affordability and revenue stability because those kind of compete. And then the rate stability and minimization of customer impacts is not necessarily competing with any of those, but just really kind of monitoring how we see the impacts on the cost categories or the customer categories. So all of that will be, as we go through this process and we can make refinements, we'll look to see who's impacted, how many customers get impacted, but not only how many customers, but who are those customers. And so that'll be our charge, is to kind of make sure we can balance those and help you understand how each of these may impact different customers differently.
I'm curious with the rollout of AMI for us in the next couple of years, and the ability for our customers to log on at any time and see their usage even on the last 24 hours, and hopefully better understand the relationship to the utility. How does that affect this study?
Yeah, so what that'll allow, I think, over time is I think a couple of things. One is, it may, they'll be getting monthly bills, which will be one benefit because it'll, again, they can see that adjustment quicker than they can now since they get, a bi-monthly bill. When we saw the chart on the bill frequency earlier, Will, I think, said on a bi-monthly basis was it 9 the median and then 10 was the average? Correct. So there's not, I don't think there's a tremendous amount of, necessarily, a lot of elective use, on your system, but there certainly is some. That will allow folks to kind of monitor and see when they're falling into that second or third tier, and if they want to, say reduce. Well, irrigation's charged at a separate, so that's going to be, unless they just completely reduce that use, then because that's all just captured at one. So if they have any non-irrigation use, they could adjust their habits some, but I don't see like a tremendous amount of that, happening. I'm trying to think from and if they choose different times, that's not going to matter either. I don't see a tremendous amount of like elective use to see where it would. Typically what happens is those that are irrigating are going to continue to kind of irrigate unless that irrigation rate is just, even much, much higher. It may change some habits to some degree, but I don't know that it'll create a huge impact from a reduction in your use given what your average is.
So what you're saying is when you got to flush the toilet, you got to flush the toilet. Right. That's right.
Yeah, but I guess where I was going, Elaine, was it's the things like simple to understand, rate stability. I think we'll be able to be a lot more transparent to our users. Just on how the relationship with utility and each customer is. I think that's only going to be a good thing from the AMI, and I would think that will possibly affect some of these questions next study that you do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It definitely gives you a lot more granular data to where, you can see a lot of that more. When it is bi-monthly and we have to roll that up now, it does, it does kind of, you can't see the, it kind of skews it a bit, in other words, because you're taking that 2 months worth of data, and right. You only have 6 months as opposed to monthly. And you're right, what you will be doing is the customer will have all of that information in their hand. They can at that point really do something about their use and see immediately what the impact is. They can take control of that with the exception of us putting all the cost in the fixed component, taking that away from them, they will have that ability to, if they want to reduce their bill or see the impact, they'll be able to do that.
Cool, thanks.
Okay. So that was, as we said, that was really what the purpose today was, to get those objectives from you, because it does help us drive the study. It helps us understand what's most important to you. And as we come back to you, that's what we'll be focusing on and helping you understand if we make these refinements, these are the impacts that we may be looking at and making sure we balance those out. From here, over the next couple of months, we'll now be spending a good bit of our time looking at the cost, allocating those costs, looking at all the usage information, and really getting those components of the study so that we can then make any refinements to the rate structure. And the target is to come back to you in February and have you see the results of the cost allocation and some of these refinements.
Hey, Elaine, it's Chris Parker. I'm kind of fuzzy. Did we do this ranking back in 2018, the last time we had you do the study?
Yeah, we always do this because that does help us understand what's most important to you all, so that when we're developing this, we're not just looking at all the options, we're honing in. I don't have those in front of me, but I would imagine, given that we put we were looking to increase the revenue stability, I would certainly think revenue stability was certainly one of the ones. We'd have to go back and look to see what were the other top ones as well.
Yeah, I'd be just kind of interested to see if we're all thinking the same over these number of years.
Yeah, we can pull that information. We should have it somewhere.
Okay, so I think, yeah.
Yeah, that's all we had on our end.
Okay. Thanks, Elaine. Sorry, keep on cutting each other off. Yeah, so are there any other questions for the Raftellus team about the study and next steps? Try to have everything wrapped up so that when we're, going through the budget cycle next spring, this coming spring, we'll be ready to make those rate recommendations.
I just wanted to thank Will and Elaine for getting all this data together for us.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we'll look forward to talking to you again with some rates.
Okay. I guess we will need the one thing you will have to approve is to adjourn the meeting. So.
Okay, I see Hugh is back. So do we have a motion to adjourn? Either you or Tom?
So moved.
Tom, do we have your second? If you unmute yourself.
Sure.
Okay, so we've got a motion to adjourn and we got a second. Patrice, do we need to do a roll call vote?
I'll do a roll call vote for the Finance Committee. Is that correct, Courtney?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right, the three of us, Tom, you and I.
Yes. So Finance Chairman Chris Parker,
So moved.
Commissioner Tom Griffin,
Yes.
and Commissioner Hugh Jernigan.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks everybody for coming.
Yep. Thank y'all.
And have a good rest of your Tuesday.
See you later.
Thank you.
Well done, everybody. See ya.
Thank y'all.